Ferrari have just debuted the SF-23 at Maranello with a fan event. During this fan event, Charles Leclerc actually took the SF-23 out on track. And it seems that things ran very smoothly for the first couple of laps with the SF-23, as stated by Charles over team radio.
It feels good. I think we are starting well because I'm pretty sure we are the fastest on track, so that's a good sign already. But everything feels good, mate.
In terms of changes made on the SF-23, a lot of work has been put into the front suspension, which Ferrari state represents the biggest change relative to that of its predecessor. But this shouldn't fool you into thinking that the rest of the car hasn't been paid attention to and refined either. The front wing has been altered, we have a shorter nose, new side pod inlets, new halo winglets, new mirrors of course to go along with the changes for this year, new cooling slots, some of which have very interesting features, or at least in terms of what I believe they're trying to do with the airflow, and they have a slimmer rear end. Before we dive even further into the features that stand out on this year's Ferrari, let me know what your initial reaction was to seeing this car. I want to know whether you thought it was an improvement on last year in terms of its livery, how the car looks, and just where you think this car is going to end up in terms of both championships. With the SF-23 being predominantly an evolution on last year's Ferrari Challenger, of course it's going to keep many of the characteristics that made last year's car successful, but with further refinement to that. And with the SF-23, there's been some clever solutions added in, which should bring them a little bit more performance over their competitors. Now, some of these are quite hard to spot, and actually you needed to brighten up the studio images because they were very dark and they were hiding some clever pieces of innovation. In particular, if you look at this photo, which is brightened of course, you will see there are on either side of both side pods, there's these kind of slots. Well, they're not necessarily slots, for in factuality what they are openings. And what I believe Ferrari are doing, they've got this sort of S-duct tunnel where the air is going in through these two openings on either side of the side pod, making its way up kind of alongside the monocoque, and they are actually coming out of these really two small intricate little cooling outlets on either side on top of these side pods. Now, of course, there's two reasons for that. One, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some sort of cooling for the engine taking place within this. But secondary to that, of course, is the, I would say, aerodynamic benefit that comes along with this ingenious piece of design. Because, of course, with this tunnel, they're going to have an increased airflow, and it's just going to attach a more powerful stream of air over the car, and it'll just help with the aerodynamics and the cornering in general, I would suspect. I am no technical expert, but that is just my interpretation of what they're trying to achieve with it. Up next, we have the Ferrari front ring, and for those that remember last year, Mercedes tried to introduce these very small kind of slots across the front ring, which were protested and outlawed last year. But what's really interesting for this year is they're actually legal, and so Ferrari should actually be able to get away with using this particular launch version of the front ring if they do indeed don't make any further refinements before the first Grand Prix of the year in Bahrain. So I wouldn't be too surprised if we see these sort of things pop up on the Mercedes front wing as well. Head of chassis area Enrico Cardial had this to state about the suspension. The most obvious change to the car are definitely in the area of the front suspension, where we have moved from a configuration with a high track rod to one with a low track rod, driven by the demands of the aerodynamics. These changes were made on the one hand to help the aerodynamicists get the results that they were looking for, while on the other to increase the range of adjustments possible on the car at each track. The front wing is also different, as is the construction of the nose itself, as the primary element is no longer attached to the nose, instead it is floating. But all in all these changes feel like they will add up to a surmountable improvement, which should allow the Scuderia team to finally mount a season-long challenge to that of the likes of Red Bull and of course Mercedes, who we have yet to see reveal their cars as of yet. But we do have to look forward to Mercedes' launch tomorrow, so that will be something to keep our eyes out for as well. I think we're going to be in for a real interesting season, and I think it's going to be one that's going to have plenty of ups and downs. I think even with these changes, it's going to be extremely hard to predict who's going to have the upper hand at the beginning of the season. You would presume it's going to most likely be Red Bull, since they were the team that had the quickest car at the end of the year, regardless of Mercedes winning that race in Brazil. With Ferrari, I presume and kind of still expect them to have their ups and downs, and that will be kind of track dependent. But I do believe the changes that they have made to the car, particularly around the front suspension, will allow them to adapt the characteristics of the car to each and every track that they go to, offering a more viable and comfortable solution for the car, so they don't have those sort of balance problems that they encountered on many different tracks, particularly after the technical directive which was issued around the midway point. And after that, it just seemed their tyre wear became very excessive, to the point of extreme wear in comparison to that of Red Bull and where they had been at the beginning of the season. And so I think all the changes would have been based around that, and of course the new Pirelli and of course the new construction of Pirelli tyres, because of course that is another huge piece of the jigsaw puzzle for every Formula 1 team, is how their cars interact with the Pirelli tyres, and the Pirelli tyres how it interacts with the asphalt that they will have at each Grand Prix weekend. So yeah, that is the video. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, as you'll be getting a lot more Formula 1 videos, particularly over the actual winter pre-season test in Bahrain, which kind of feels ironic to say, considering we're in a hot, basically desert. Alright then guys, I will catch you all later on in the week.